Hello and welcome back. In this video I'm going to show a process for manipulating glass in the kiln while it's fusing. This is not raking, it happens at a lower temperature. I'm also going to show how I make quick custom acrylic mounting brackets for hanging glass on the wall. Alright, let's get started. So here's a look at the glass I'm going to be using. These are COE 104 rods, and they have several advantages over the more familiar 90 and 96 rods. I can think of 4 advantages right now. They come in meter-long lengths, so they're much more useful in larger kilns. They come from 3 millimeters up to 15 millimeters in diameter, and they're way less costly than the bullseye rods, and they've got about 140 compatible colors. Here's a look at some diameters here. Here's 3 millimeter black and 15 millimeter. Quite a wide variety available. I spread out some to make choices from today. They make about 150 colors of compatible glass. So I buy it like this when I can. This is straight from the factory in Italy, and these are 10 kilo or 22 pound bundles, but they do have a minimum order of 100 kilos, so that's not the best way to buy it for everybody, but there are other options. And there's another good one out there right now, super cheap. It's this glass here. So these have been cut up into thirds of the rods, and this batch of glass in this color range has had a very slight bit of water damage on it, so it's just a little bit etched on the surface, and after it's fused you can't even tell, it just burns right off. And France Art Glass is selling this stuff right now for $4.80 a pound, and that's with free shipping in the US, so it's probably the best deal out there in art glass right now. $4.80 a pound for glass rods. It's a really good deal. I'll be using a lot of these rods in this particular project. So here's the color range for that super cheap glass. There's 2 different light purples, a dark purple, a medium green, and a lighter green, and then a light transparent blue and an amber. So Bullseye sells their stringers and rod for $40 a pound plus shipping. This stuff is $4.80 a pound with free shipping, so it works out to be about 1/10 of the price of the Bullseye glass. So it's a super good deal right now, and I think it's going to last a while. He's got lots of this glass. So it's franceartglass.com, and here's a couple of screenshots of the catalog listings for these colors in this cheap color range. And in Canada we have nortelglass.com, which imports the rods from Italy as well. And in the 5 to 6 millimeter range there's 20 to 25 13-inch rods per pound. So here's an example. Here's 1 pound of one of the common colors cut to the 13-inch size, and there's 25 rods in this bundle, and Nortel would sell that for about $13 Canadian. So this winds up being about 50 cents a rod. So here's a look at the tools that I'll be using. A pair of tile nippers for cutting the rods, and a long pair of tweezers I got from MSC Industrial Supply. Mostly use it for lamp working though. And this little metal hook that I bent up for grabbing the glass and pulling on it or pushing it. And a pair of insulated leather welding gloves. I don't use the fiber-based gloves because they're quite toxic. And these are much cheaper, and they'll never catch on fire because they're leather. If I find that a glove is getting too hot, I'll just shake it off onto the floor and let it cool down for a minute and then put it back on. And I don't bother using eye protection when I'm looking into kilns. I mean, I wear reading glasses so I can focus better, but the color temperature of a fusing kiln is significantly lower than like a campfire. And people sit around and stare into campfires all the time without worrying about damaging their eyes. So I don't see a fusing kiln being much different at all. This is 104 glass, so it's much softer than 90 or 96, and the opals are much stickier. So I'm going to give it a nice layer of dust on the shelf primer. And I've put some stilts in the kiln to bring the board up to a height just below the elements. closer to the entrance because I am going to be reaching in hot, so it's easier for access if I don't have to reach down to the bottom. And I have to assemble this whole thing in the kiln. And this has to be perfectly level or I'll get rolling rods. And I'm going to be using this cheap etched glass, the light pink and the light green. So I'm going to wipe the rods a little bit just to clean them off a bit. And I'm going to go corner to corner to get the longest possible design. And now I can start adding rods. I have to make sure to leave a little bit of space before my overlapping rods so that I can bend them. That's what this whole project is about. It's about reaching into the kiln and bending these rod ends. And I'll cut some rods down for the smaller areas. And now it's time for the second layer, but in the opposite direction. So again, I'm going to start corner to corner to get the longest possible reach. At $4 a pound, this is the cheapest art glass out there. And I talked to Mike France the other day. He's got hundreds of pounds of the different colors, so it'll be going on for a while, that deal. Alright, I think I'm just about done. It looks a little bit open right here. I might put one more there. And I have to keep in mind I need at least one good strong member down the middle for my mounting bracket. Okay, that's ready to fire. So I'm going to run this up at 700 an hour, and at 12 or 1250 I'll reach in and start to twist up the glass. This glass is a little softer than the traditional fusing glass, so it responds to the heat a little bit faster. So also in this first firing I'm going to test some of these opaque glasses. They behave a little bit differently than the transparent ones in the kiln. Some of the colors are a bit reactive. So these ones here in particular, the green range, greenish blue, those ones can reduce terribly in the kiln, and the pink ones can devitrify. So I'm going to test, maybe 8 or 10 of these randomly and just see how they respond. See if I can find a couple of good ones. Okay, it's time to start bending the glass. I'm going to start with my long-reaching poker thing here. I'm just going to start bending some of them like this, just a little bit. And I can do, 2 or 3 at a time and then shut the lid. I don't want to cool the glass too much because then it becomes a little bit harder to bend. So I'll just let that recover for a minute or so and then I'll reach in and do the next batch. I can come back at them from different directions and twist them up a little bit more. But I have to get up close and personal with my tweezers if I want to really curl them up. There we go. A little bit more and I'm done. So I've gone around the whole perimeter now, so I'll turn it off and let it cool slowly overnight. Alright, let's have a look at this. I'll have a look at my test pieces first here. These two pinks definitely devitrified a little bit. This one has a beautiful satiny finish. This one is devitrified in a more random way. Now these two are those copper greens I was talking about. They reduce terribly in certain environments. And this one was a similar color, but for some reason it didn't devitrify at all. And this one has a metallic sheen to it. It's definitely interacting with the kiln atmosphere in a creative way. And no devid on those. This one devided terribly. Look at that. That's gross. There we are. It's always good to test things first. So the opaque colors in general can be a little problematic in the kiln environment. That's why I prefer the transparents. But I'm definitely going to use this. That's amazing. I think I'll use this in my next one. And this turned out great. Let's go in for a closer look. Lots of fun to be had reaching into the kiln and manipulating the soft glass. It looks so nice compared to regular angular looking kiln firings. Get in there and do something whimsical. Now I'll flip it over. So absolutely no shelf primer. Stuck to it. Beautiful. Okay, let's get on with the next one. So in this next one I'm going to be using mostly opaque but lots of different colors, and I'm definitely going to use one of these here, which is the Fettri catalog number 272. It's the one that reduced to a beautiful metallic silver. I think I'm going to use this color range here in conjunction with the light green ones, and I'm going to put a little bit of red in there too. Let's see what that looks like over red. Well, I think I prefer it to the red compared to the other bright colors, the orange and the yellow. Maybe I'll just put one red on there and see what that looks like. Yeah, I think I'll do that. I'll mix that with the green. And 24 inches is the long one, the first one in the center. Okay, and this one's ready to roast. And now I can start bending these a little bit. Alright, let's lift this out and have a look. Alright, it looks interesting. This is the reduction color down the middle here, and also this little piece here that goes and does this little shepherd hook at the top. I don't know if the reduction shininess is showing up on the video. I might have to take this one outside. There, I can definitely see outdoors here that center line, and that shepherd's hook is a bright shiny metallic silver. It doesn't even look like glass. It looks like that PMC clay that you throw in a kiln and it turns silvery. So I'm going to make the next one entirely out of these yellow rods here. And the first one, long one on the diagonal, and I'll build the rest of the design around this. It should be okay, but if any of them start to roll, I might have to put little tiny chips of glass in there just to keep them steady. And I'm not going to put them in parallel because that would be very difficult to maintain, so I'm going to intentionally put them in at different angles. And I can push and pull on the members inside the lattice structure just to give them a little bit of character so they're less angular and a little bit more organic. Well, playtime's just about done. It's really easy to overwork it. Sometimes it's hard to stop. It's just too much fun. Okay, I'm going to give it a little bit of a tug. The whole thing's loose, which is good. That means it's floating around on top of my kiln shelf powder and it's not sticking. Oh, it's gone back to yellow again now that it's cooled. Well, let's get it out and have a look. So there's about 5 rods to a pound, full-length rods. So this thing here is probably about 1.5 pounds in weight. So it's super lightweight. So I didn't want to overfire it. I wanted to retain a bit of a line where the rods overlapped. Let's flip it over. And no shelf primer is stuck to this, which is great because it's a very sticky glass. Turned out good. Okay, on with the next one. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be pre-shaping some of the rods before I assemble them into a design. Because of the nature of the round rods, it's hard to keep them in position. until they're stuck together with the heat. So I'm going to make a tree. I'm going to put one straight piece down the middle, and I'm going to have two shorter pieces that curve out at the bottom. And then I'm going to have the tree limbs, like this. And it'll also be a window hanging. So I'm going to be cutting these pieces here and placing them in the kiln and heating up the kiln, and I'm going to reach in and I'm just going to bend the tips of these 6 tree limbs, and I'm going to just slightly bend out these 2 tree trunk pieces, just a little bit, and that'll be the first firing. So I'm going to use this light topaz brown down the middle, and I'm going to use these greens for the rest of it. If my pieces wind up being too long when I assemble the design, after I've curled the bottoms, then I can always cut them down. There, I've got these lined up for bending, but I have to do this in a different way because these pieces are individual short pieces and they'll move around on the shelf. So I'm going to bridge them all together with scrap pieces of float glass, like this, as just a bit of a support system. And I'm going to put one across the top as well to catch these 2 long vertical pieces, because I'm just going to bend them out a little bit at the bottom. And then I'll cut off the excess later. Okay, that's ready to put in the kiln. It has a nice solid anchor now that'll support all of the pieces as I bend them. There, just a bit of a twist to my tree limbs. And my tree limbs are pre-bent, ready for use. So now I can just go and cut them off the anchor. And I'll start with the long ones first. So here's my vertical pieces. And I added an extra little green piece down here, just to give it a bit more weight at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to cut my first limb, so I can place it up here like that. And now I have to measure and cut. There, it's starting to take shape. Because these are pre-bent, they're less prone to rolling around, so I can actually assemble this without having to do it in the kiln. Alright, that's it. And the last limb I'm going to bend downwards and make it quite short. Like that. Okay, ready for the kiln. Alright, let's have a look. Well, my little piece rolled off. That's too bad. It is actually attached, but it's not going to stay. There we go. Just have to take a wee bit of sandpaper to that rough spot there. And there's my tree with its curved limbs. I think it turned out pretty good. Looks great. And here's another one coming out, black and light purple, with a couple of pieces of medium purple in there as well. Wow. And there's no waste. All this leftover yellow stuff here I'll use to make my slug earrings. In fact, I'll show how they're made. They only take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to start by heating the yellow rod, and then I'm going to stick the point, just the point, onto the mandrel. Get it nice and toasty. There we go. There. Now I'm going to very carefully wrap the yellow rod around the mandrel, kind of like a spring coil. Just, leave a little tiny bit of space where I can see the mandrel through it. Just a bit of space. There. Now I'm actually going to tighten up that coil a little bit. I'll explain that later. And now I'm just going to take a blob and leave enough extra glass to make a head. Alright, there's my head. Okay, now I get to make the second one. I always make pairs of earrings together at the same time so I can match them while I'm looking at them. Okay, there we go. Next one. Same thing, I'll just go down the mandrel a little bit And just try and leave a little bit of space at some point where you can see through. There we go. Okay. Great, now I'll just heat a bit of extra glass up for the head and take off the rod. Great. Now it's time for the decorating. I pulled out some little thin stringers I'll be using. There we go. Green one first. Just reach through the flame just to melt the tip and just dab it on there a little bit. Just make a bit of a mess. And I've got a black one too. Same thing, reach through the flame. The actual earring isn't in the flame, it's below the flame. Alright, now I've got to melt in all those pokey bits, and that takes a minute. I can't put the eyes on until after I melt in the pokey bits, otherwise I'd probably melt in the eyes too. But I can preheat the rod so that it's ready to go when I'm ready to do the eyes. Alright, I actually thought about doing a lamp working video series, but I don't know if I will because there's already so many of them out there. Mine might not be anything different, but maybe. Okay, now for the eyes. I'll just heat that tip up and stick a little bit on. I'm just adding a little bit because I'm actually going to add 2 more colors to the eyes and it'll increase their volume a little bit, so just little dabs. There we go. Now I'm finished with the yellow. And I'm going to put white on next for the whites of the eyes. The pupils stand out way better if they're against white. So just little dabs. There we go. And the full-sized rod's way easier to apply these than a pulled-out stringer. And now the pupils. This is probably the hardest part of the whole thing. Getting the pupils on. Not getting them on, but getting them on so that they all have the same amount of volume, so that one eye doesn't look bigger than the other. Okay, I'm just going to melt the pupils in a bit so they aren't as bulgy, and it's done. There we go. I sell those for $34, and they take a little over 3 minutes to make, so that's $10 a minute for my torch time. Okay, I'll throw that in the kiln for cooling. And they're nicely matched pairs, super cute. Look at that critter, super cute. Putting the whites on the eyes sure makes a difference. Anyways, that yellow dot on the bottom there, that's a piece of wire running up through the middle, and that's why I had to tighten up that coil so that the wire didn't work its way up through the spiral. These would be a big hit in Santa Cruz. Wow, they're really cute. And here's another one coming out. Black with light green. It's a nice combination, I like it. So for this one here, I'm going to do a second layer, a transparent layer that'll be offset by about 1 inch. And this space here and this space here is where the clear acrylic bracket will join the 2 levels together and mount it to the wall. So I'm going to use these green pieces here, the ones with the water damage. And I'm going to have to orient these ones like this so that I can use the bracket on both levels. But the top layer here, I'm going to orient it differently than the bottom one. So I'll be going in this direction here instead of this direction. And just for fun, I'm going to sneak this little tiny piece under here. Like that. Okay, it's time to start twisting. And let's have a quick look at my water-damaged green glass. It looks beautiful. You can't even tell that that surface was compromised. It didn't devitrify at all. It looks great. So I'll deal with the mounting after I finish these firings, but this will sit about 1 inch above this one here, and you can see the opposing direction of the grain now that I've got both the pieces fired. So I'm going to slightly bend this in a commercial platter mold, and I'm going to run it up around 400 an hour, and it'll be slumped by around 1150. This is softer glass, so it does respond to a lower temperature than the traditional fusing glass. Alright. There, so that'll mount about an inch above the yellow one, like that. Slight curve to it. And this next one, just yellow and green. Well, I think that should do it. It only takes a few openings to bend everything up. Alright, let's have a look at this one. Wow, it's neat. It's nice how the playful, whimsical bends really offset the angular nature of the thing. Looks great. Yeah, here's another one coming out. Purple and blue. Wow. That's all made of short rods. So I'm going to add a third dimension to my first one as well, but I'm going to slump it in a different way. So I'm going to put little blocks in the corner like that, and little pieces of kiln board like that. These are actually bisque-fired ceramic tiles that I use for little kiln boards. So the weight pushes them up flat, but as the weight shifts towards the center when the glass gets soft and starts to slump, then these will tip back up again gently. But right now they're supporting a much bigger area than if they were angled. They would only support the points. Alright, I have to make sure that when I slump this, that my mounting area lays completely flat on the kiln board so that I can attach my bracket to it. So I'll run this up around 500 an hour, and I'll peek in around 1150 or so, and I imagine it'll be slumped by then. There, it looks pretty good. There's one more thing I want to do. So if I bend these up like this, and drop the temperature, then they should stay in a third-dimensional shape. Look at that. Wow. Let's see if I can retain that by dropping the temperature down a little bit. So I've crashed it down to a annealing temperature, so I'll hold it there for half an hour or so to equalize, and then I'll let it cool down slowly overnight. Okay, let's have a look. That's a great slumping technique if you've got a delicate edge with minimal support. Wow, look at that. It's amazing what can come out of a fusing kiln if you reach in and play with it a bit. Look at that loop. That's really amazing. And again, this is the etched glass that I bought for cheap. And after it's been fired, you can't even tell that the surface was compromised. Wow, look at that. Okay, it's time to get these things mounted. So for my support brackets, I'm going to be cutting up some of these acrylic risers. They're fairly cheap and they come in lots of different dimensions and lots of different thicknesses. They're perfect for making offset hanging brackets for wall mounts. There's 3 different thicknesses right there. These are great too, these things you open up and put signs in the middle. I can make this into 2 mounts, and I can get any distance I want off the wall up to about 6 inches. So for my single layered ones, it's going to be quite easy. I'll just determine the offset I want from the wall, and I'll cut it there, and I'll put a couple of drill holes in the back side of that right angle. So for my bottom layer, the support will be along this rail here, and these will be the access holes for the tabs to support the top layer. And here's the top layer here. That'll be mounted about an inch above. So this is the stand I'm going to use, so I'll cut it off about an inch up for the lower section, and I'll cut it probably 2 inches up for the top section. And to make sure my top section fits through these spaces, I'm going to have to mark them as well for cutting. Okay, I'm ready to cut these up, and I'm going to cut them up on my water-cooled diamond tile saw. The diamond blade leaves a beautiful finished edge on the acrylic. It doesn't overheat it, doesn't chip it, just makes a beautiful edge. I really like these acrylic display risers. They're absolutely perfect for making all kinds of custom glass mounts. Tile saw makes really nice clean cuts. Absolutely perfect. Okay, I'll get all these drilled, but I can't drill the bottom half of the double one because I have to mount the top pieces first so the holes will line up. So this is the region here where I'll be gluing the support. So I'm going to spray it with glass cleaner and just get it nice and clean so the glue adheres better. And I'm going to place a book next to that line there. And it's a spiral bound book. I can add or remove pages as needed to get the height that I need so that my bracket will sit on here at 90 degrees. And I'm going to use this E6000 glue. I'm just going to put a bead down the edge of the acrylic. There. And then I'll just set it on the glass like that, and I'll center it in the middle of that particular member, right like that. There. That's it. And that'll hold it at a 90-degree angle until it hardens. So let that sit overnight. And for the twisty slumped one, I have to raise it up off the table. And for the double layered one, now I can line up my drill holes. So get that situated to where it will be glued on the underside. And now I can line up these where they're going to reach through between the ribs, and I can mark them for drilling. And I'm going to make sure this fits before it's too late. Perfect. Now for the double one. So I'm going to leave this stand that I glued yesterday screwed down to the board, and I'm going to place the bottom piece on first, and I've got some books here to level it. Maybe just a little bit more under this side until it stops moving. There, that's good. So now I'm ready to glue the first one. And I'll be gluing it right side up this time, so I'm going to be careful not to apply too much glue. I don't want it to dribble down the stand. And after I glue the first one, then I'm going to do the same thing for the second one. I'm going to put more books on here, or magazines, and bring it up to the next level. And then I'm going to be gluing this one onto the top pieces like that. There, and now to level the top one. A little bit more on this side. A little bit less. American Glass Review, 1991. I've been at this a long time. I think that's about right. Well, it's turned out great. I can't wait to get it mounted on the wall. So here's an edge view of the finished bracket, and you can see the two higher ones are sitting on top of the lower one. So here's a look at the first two to go up. They've got longer rods in them, and they come out from more of a central bottom and splay out to a wider top. And I really like how they can be oriented in different directions to get a totally different look. And here's a look at the double one. Wow, that's a very busy shadow. Kind of looks neat. I like it. And here's the 3D one, where I slumped it and then lifted and twisted it. Neat stuff. And here it is from a different angle. I love that shadow. That's wild. And the last couple are almost square. Here's the black and purple one. And here's the blue and purple one, made entirely out of the shorter rods that had the water damage. Neat stuff. So during the time that I'm making this video, France Art Glass has announced that they're selling their business to someone in California and everything's being moved to San Jose. So I wouldn't hesitate to pick up some of this glass before the new owners decide to change the prices. Alright, there we go. A super cheap source of COE 104 glass fusing rods. Reaching into a kiln and manipulating the glass while it's being fused. And making custom high quality acrylic brackets for wall mounting your glass. So thanks for watching. And as I usually say, if you like what you see or learn something new, then please help to spread the word about these tutorials. I can always use a bit more publicity here. There's over 150 of these tutorials now on my Patreon account, and I'm still adding them on a regular basis, so stay tuned, there's still lots more to come.